a quick intro from me before I get going into the actual demo and explaining the features. So, roles and permissions are not the sexiest topic in the world related to other features on our platform like AI generated courses and AI knowledge bases and all that kind of stuff. But they are really important. And immediately you start scaling up your use of the learning platform, you very quickly find out that you need to assign specific permissions and specific roles, and sometimes even custom roles to certain key people in your organization. So, what I'm going to show you today is what are the standard roles in our platform? Those are the ones that are baked in. What are the standard permissions associated with those roles? Then I'm going to show you how to modify permissions for the standard roles, and not just at the top organization level, but if you use our organization feature where you can build sub-organizations for, your sales team is one organization, your marketing team is another. I'm going to show you how you can customize features for all the sub-organizations all at once. Or if you want them to vary for a specific organization, how you can customize them for individual organizations. And then I'm going to move on to how you can build special custom roles with their own permissions. But don't worry, out of the box, it does a very nice job. Sometimes you don't have to change anything, but I want to show you how you can customize it if you so wish. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully at this point, you can all see my dashboard. This is what you see when you first log into the CYPHER platform. And we're going to focus on just a few areas to begin with. But one thing I want to mention, if I click on my profile, this is me, Graham Admin, you'll notice that at the top right-hand side, I have here administrator, super administrator, instructor, learner, manager, and mentor. And those are the list of my roles in the system. So what I can do in the system is primarily defined by what roles I have. And if I go to another user, so I'm going to go into the learners area and I search for Sally, who's down here somewhere, you'll notice that Sally is learner. So what she can do is obviously less than me, who's got like every role that there is. So let's just get started by taking a look at the actual roles that can be associated with user accounts. That's on the admin accounts area. And this is basically where you can import, export accounts, set up rules, set up avatars, all kinds of stuff. But the area that we are specifically interested in is the roles tab. So here are all the standard roles that you get out of the box, so to speak. And so you'll see things like a learner for users who take courses. And this is always enabled because it wouldn't make any sense to have a learning platform without learners. But there are also standard roles that can be toggled. So for example, if you have mentors and mentees where somebody can mentor another user and they have special access to that user, you can enable it or you can disable it. So totally up to you. Some of our businesses actually do provide training for children, and they have parent accounts which can manage their children. So this can be enabled and disabled similarly. We've got teaching assistants who help the instructors with managing their courses. We've got monitors, which are read-only administrators that can administrate the entire system in the sense, sorry, they can see everything in the system, but they cannot modify anything. And then you'll see things like administrators, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. They basically can edit most of the settings. And then there is one super admin. So out of all the users in your entire system, there can only ever be one super admin, and they are the ones who can modify the permissions and do a whole bunch of other things. And clearly, because administrators have a lot of rights, you don't want to give away administrator roles willy-nilly. You have to be quite careful about who gets them. So these are all the kind of the built-in roles, and I'll show you later on what this add button does. That's for extending the standard roles and adding additional custom roles. So what about the permissions associated with all of these roles? So we have another area here called permissions. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. I'm not going to read through all this. I'm just going to kind of explain it to you casually. But basically, there are two levels of permissions. There are permissions that apply site-wide. This is what we call business level permissions. And then there are permissions that apply within the scope of an individual course. So if I click on courses here, here are the permissions associated with a course, like can you add co-teachers to the course? Can you enroll learners? So there's basically two lots of permissions. And what you'll see in this permissions grid is all the permissions associated with users who are in your default organization. So if you think about organization as being a hierarchy, by default, when you add a user, they go into the top level organization. But if you use our organizations feature, and you can see here a list of the organizations that I've created on my site, those are all sub-organizations underneath the top organization. So what we're looking at here in the permissions grid is all the permissions associated with users and roles who are in that top level organization. That's kind of like the power organization, if you like. So you'll see here down the left, all the different kinds of things like, can they search the site? Do they have access to the calendar? Do they have a to-do widget in their dashboard? And what we've done here is we've accumulated all of the things that our customers typically want to be able to configure for whatever reason. But we are always adding new permissions. And I'll tell you a little bit about some of the permissions that we're going to be adding in December. So can you create courses? Can you view the course catalog? Can you list courses? Can you import courses? And as you can tell, things like importing groups are not the kind of things that you would typically give to a learner. Those are things that would normally be restricted to an administrator. So a whole bunch of pretty common permissions. And then for any particular role, like an administrator, an instructor, a manager, you can tell whether this permission has been granted, whether it's currently denied, and also if it's locked. So there are some permissions that we feel you wouldn't ever want anyone to have. I don't want a learner to be able to, import users, for example. So when you see a gray item here, that means not only is it denied, but you cannot change it. And if we change a permission from its default, then we will clearly indicate that by putting a little box around it. So these are the permissions for the top level organization. But one of the things that we found that's really common for certain customers, let's just say, for example, that you are a training company and you have instructors and administrators in your top level organization, and then you want to give a sub-organization to each one of your big customers. Might be a big tech company or a big pharmaceutical company. And so you want to organize all the learners into their own sub-organizations. And then sometimes those important customers, they say, well, I would like an administrator to be able to administrate my sub-organization, but not touch anything else in the system, just our organization. That way, if a learner has problems, I can help them. I don't have to go to the main training company. And this is a really common pattern where you've got one top org, the default org, and then you've got a whole bunch of sub-orgs, and you want to give those sub-orgs, all those roles, the same kind of permissions. So if I scroll down, and this sub-org thing is only shown if you've enabled organizations. Now you have sub-organization permissions. So what this is saying is that anyone with this role in any sub-organization will have the following permissions as well. So there's basically two parallel grids, one for the top org and one for the sub-org. And it's really easy to modify these things. I can just come along and click edit. And I can say, hey, if an instructor, well, it would be weird if, let's just say I don't want my instructors to be able to create courses. They're people I contract and I assign to courses, but I don't want them creating one. I would just come down here and uncheck that box and then say save. And what you'll see now under instructor, under create courses, it's been denied, and we've got a little box to show that it has been overridden. And I'm going to go ahead and edit it back before I forget about that. And similarly, if you want to modify sub-organization permissions, you just come down here and click edit here. And now I can say, hey, maybe I do want instructors and sub-orgs to do that. I save that. So it's a really easy way to control what goes in the top org, what happens in the sub-orgs. But I hear you already thinking, what if there's a special case? And by the way, as an aside, this is one of the things that makes an enterprise class learning platform non-trivial to implement because there are always special cases. And how do you handle those without making your platform ridiculously hard to administer? So what we do allow is if you go to a certain organization, Brand Design International in this case, and so I'm looking at a very specific organization, like I can see what are their users, what are their courses. I can come down here and say admin permissions. And this is the permissions grid for this specific organization. It automatically inherits by default the sub-organization permission. So if you make a change to sub-org, it automatically shows here. But now you can refine it. So I might go and say, well, this is a really quirky, unusual customer, and they do want this and they don't want this, and we came to special terms. Now I can go in and add this, and I can customize it however I like and save it. And now anyone who is in this specific organization will now get these very, very specific permissions. So just to recap, top organization permissions, sub-organization, and then per organization. And that combination we've found supports almost all of our customer permission needs. And I did mention these are the business permissions. There are also permissions associated with courses. So let's just say, for example, that you are an instructor in a course instructor. So if I add you as an instructor, then by default, you have the permission to configure the course, edit the content, add a child course, add co-teachers. But we do have customers who go, hey, we don't want them to do that. The administrators are going to set up the courses entirely, and then the instructors, we just assign them and they cannot tweak that stuff. So we might come in here and say edit and say, hey, for this site, course instructors are not going to be able to enroll or unenroll learners. That is specifically for instructors. So now you will see that if you're an instructor, then now you can no longer do those particular things. You'll also notice some site-wide roles like administrator showing up inside the course permissions. And you might say, what's going on there? Well, the idea is if you are an administrator at a default organization, then automatically you can do all of these things in the courses within your organization. So it kind of makes sense. If you can administer the entire site, you should be able to configure courses and add co-teachers and everything else. But for any reason, if you don't want this to be the case, I can then edit this and control this. I can say, hey, even administrators, I don't want to be able to do this. I just want to do this at the super administration level. So super admins can always do everything, but maybe you don't want administrators to do this. No problem at all. You can do these permissions and now you've controlled this. Go back here. And you might be asking yourself, well, Graham, who can actually edit these permissions in the first place? Which is controlled by you guessed it, permission. So one of the permissions down here is who can configure site permissions. So if you want to, you can arrange it so that only super admin can, or maybe you want all of the site administrators to do that. It's completely up to you. But by default, it's going to only be super admins who set up permissions, and then that grants the permissions to everybody else. So hopefully that's given you a pretty good idea about the kinds of permissions that you can see and modify, the kinds of permissions that might apply to courses versus site-wide. So now I'm going to introduce you to custom roles. So I'm going to come down here and go to accounts. and click on roles. Now, for a while, in the past, we only had a fixed set of roles, but it was very clear that people wanted to be able to create new kinds of roles that would be basically similar to existing roles, but then customize their permissions. So let's just say, for example, you have the concept of a monitor. So a monitor is basically like an administrator. They can see everything, but they can't change anything. But now let's just say you want someone you can read everything, but I do want you to be able to change a couple of little things. So what I can do is this. I can say I'm going to add a new role, and this is going to be called a super monitor. Monitor with super pairs. And then the super monitor is going to be a kind of monitor. So whenever you create a custom role, it's always a variation on what we call a built-in role. So I'm going to create something called a super monitor. And when I do this, it's now shown in the hierarchy as a kind of monitor. And what this means, by the way, if later on, if I create someone who's a super monitor, if I come over here and go use as monitors, they will show up as a kind of monitor, but we will indicate super monitor. But I'll show you how that works in a little bit. So that's all you've got to do to create a custom role. And you can create custom roles whose parent is a custom role. So I can call someone like a super duper monitor who is a kind of super monitor. So that works fine as well. And you can create an unlimited number of roles, but we recommend that you add them sparingly. If you have too many roles and too many permissions, sometimes it can just get too confusing. So now let's just say I've created a super monitor role. Now I'm going to create a user. I'm going to create someone. And you'll notice now when I come to the form, it's going to say, what is the account role? And here are the built-in roles. So you can see monitor just like usual. But now you've got custom roles, super monitor. So I'm going to create a user who is a super monitor. And I'm going to call them super monitor 1, just to make it really clear. That's all I'm going to do. Everything else can just be defaulted. Say save. So here is the user I just added. And if I click on their profile, you will now see here, super monitor. So they can do whatever a monitor can do by default, but we're going to customize their permission. And notice if I come down here and I go to, this is the user flyout, and I go, let me have a look at all the monitors in my system. Whoops. That you will notice this guy here has a little special tag that says this is a super monitor. And if I made something called super monitor, it would show up there as well. So it's a kind of monitor, but we always flag it if it has a custom permission. And now what I can do, I can come back to permissions. And we will see here this new column, super monitor. Now the super monitors, all of their permissions are automatically inherited from monitor. So if you look down the columns, you'll see they exactly match. But now I want to customize it a little bit. So I can come into super monitor and I can say, I also want them to access community groups, and I don't want them to be able to create reports. So I can kind of decide what I want to do there and save them. And now the super monitor is similar, but not identical to my monitor. Whoops, there we go. So you'll see this is a permission which has been customized. It used to be an X, and now it's a check. So that's how easy it is to create a custom role. And then once you've created the custom role, you can just customize permissions just like any built-in role. And we do add some protection so that you don't accidentally delete a custom role if there are users associated. So if I come and try and delete custom monitor, it'll try and delete it and say, oopsie, there's already a user with that. So there's already a user with that role. So we have some built-in protection so you don't accidentally delete users with particular roles. And I'll also mention that we support custom roles quite deeply in our platform. So if you're using our API to create users with certain roles or change their roles, then you can use custom roles just like built-in roles. If you do an export of users, then we will include any custom roles they have in a roles field. If you want to import users, then you can indicate custom roles just like built-in roles. So we try and make it work, uniformly, just like built-in roles throughout our system. Now, I believe I've actually covered everything that I can think of, unless Enrique, you can think of anything that I forgot to talk about.
Yeah,
And
no, yeah, I think everything has been covered. So I reviewed the Q&A section, and there are not any questions for this. So yeah, thank you for this, and thank you everybody for joining today's Cypher Live session. We hope you found it really helpful, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
yeah, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.